Yeah, we'll turn to Genesis 31, 26 through 32. And as soon as someone is there, let's read those verses as a reminder, as a kind of refresher of what we're talking about here.
Laban caught up with Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country, and Laban with his kinsmen camped in the hill country of Gilead. Then Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done by deceiving me and carrying away my daughters like captives of the sword? Why did you flee secretly and deceive me and did not tell me, so that I might have sent you away with joy and with songs, with timbrel and with lyre? And did not allow me to kiss my sons and my daughters. Now you have done foolishly."
I refuse to read King James.
Just because we made fun of you last week.
I have the power to harm you, but last night the God of your father said to me, "Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. Now you've gone off because you long to return to your father's house. But why did you steal my God?" Jacob answered Laban, "I was afraid because I thought you would take your daughters away from me by force. But if you find anyone who has your gods, he shall not live. In the presence of our relatives, see for yourself where there is anything of yours here with me, and if so, take it." Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the gods.
All right, good. So where we're at with this is, what we've talked about is how Jacob is fleeing away. He's fleeing to the hill country of Gilead, and it's in the very place that he thought would be safe that he was overcome. And we've talked a little bit about how that is so true to life. We think we've got our plan. We're devising our plan towards safety, and but God has a bigger agenda. He's actually overcome in that place, and that's not a bad thing. It's a wonderful thing to be overcome. And then secondly, what we've tried to look at is try to put our minds in Laban pursuing his son-in-law for 7 days on horseback. As we've seen the westerns where generally the good guy is trying to go after the bad guy. I want to leave that part out, but you can picture him riding hours and hours and hours on his horse to try to overcome and make up that time, and then he finally gets there. But on the night before, God comes to Laban in a dream and says, "Watch out, be careful." Imagine if you were trying to pursue someone like this for 7 days hard. You would have this whole tape be playing over and over of what you're going to say and how you're going to interact and all this, and you do a core dump on whoever it is you're pursuing. But God said that night before, "Be careful." And so this is why this is so dramatic, is this interaction. And we've been looking at the initial offering of Laban to his son-in-law. He's got tremendous amount of pent-up emotion, but yet the caution of God on what to say and what not to say. And this is what he says. This is what we've been looking at. And basically, by review, we've looked at this slide right here is our review, is that we've looked at this idea of Laban's initial words. He's speaking down. He's making himself bigger. This is all perception. This isn't actual height here, but he's speaking down. He is in a position of power. And he's speaking down, and what he's doing to his son-in-law is, first of all, he's dislodging his thinking, right here, dislodging his thinking through questions. What, why, why did you do this, and so forth. And then he accuses him. He doesn't ask to draw, he's not drawing out, it's like a shock treatment to get Jacob to be thinking, to dislodge his thinking what he's doing. Then he accuses him, and then this whole thing of judgment. He has passed judgment on Jacob. And I think rightfully so, but regardless, it's judgment. And then we looked at judgment over here as this idea of how we as human beings, we take a statement from another. We frame people's, we frame people and how they react in our heads. And this is my whole point, is that we've got pre-information, and then we tend to interpret that information on the current facts. And I call it as framing. You know, we're framing people, and then in interactions, as simple as when our spouse comes to us and says something wells up within us, and we're thinking, although I think probably most of us are smart enough not to say anything, but we say, she always does that. You know, she always says that. Well, it's because we framed it that way. That's a simple. And then we put that frame in context to other pieces in our lives. So I've got it framing, and then we categorize it. I am saying that it is part of the human condition, guys. And this is what Jesus died for. The part of the human condition is this whole dysfunctional way in which we categorize and frame people, and we place them in our heads. And so no matter what they do, they can't break out of it, because it's in our heads. It's our perceptions. Thus, the tragedies and the dysfunctions within our relationship, both within the church and without the church. This is why Jesus died. This is why we need transformation in our lives through the Holy Spirit. So anyway, that's where we've been. Now, as I was meditating on it this week, we're going to do one last summary here of Laban. Then we're going to move on to what I think is an amazing response by Jacob. There's something deep going on, and we're gonna look at that next week. We're not going to look at his response in verse 31 today, but we're gonna set the stage for next time. Laban's initial offering to Jacob, and I'm calling it, in summary, what we've talked about, the victim power. I believe, some of you are nodding. Some of you have some experience with it. But Laban, in my opinion, is casting himself within this context as a victim. And he's using victim power. Victim power is used with such phrases as, "You deceived me." Right here. You deceived me. You did not tell me. And then this one, you did not allow me. Okay? Have you ever had experience? We're going to talk about this a little bit here. It's coming from a person. A victim is a person who perceives himself as small, as powerless, but in the attempt to gain power, is using powerlessness as a means of power. Do you get that? It's using a sense of you took something from me, and that is a high, that we could call it manipulation. But in most human relationships, where this happens is in a familial relationship, and people get really good at this. Of manipulating. And I'm going to give you some examples here in just a bit. So the victim power is using what has been done to me in order to gain power over another. Now I've used this idea of power. And where does that come from? Because this is what I believe, guys, is that we in our human condition, our natural human condition, perceive ourselves as less than, not good enough. We don't, there's something we have to do in order to measure up. We are this, you may agree with me or not, but this is our default mode, that we naturally see ourselves as not good enough. And this, my thinking goes back to Genesis chapter 3, where the first thing that happened after the fall is they found themselves inadequate. They had to cover themselves with something. And that same issue has perpetrated throughout the course of all generations, and it's the major reason why Jesus died. So we see ourselves as small, and we have to do something to keep incrementing up. So thus, power. I feel powerless, so I have to use the means at my disposal in order to gain power in this relationship. Or control, we can call it control. And for some of us, or someone we know close to us, uses powerlessness in order to gain power. I, at an early age, actually, I grew up right over here a few blocks away. Well, I didn't grow up. I lived there from my high school years on, but Linda Lane, 204 Linda Lane. And before I was 20 years old, I became the family counselor. Imagine a 20-year-old kid being a counselor. My parents' marriage was terrible. They were married very young. I came along, 9 months later. They were in reaction to their upbringing. They moved to they moved to California, came back here. We were living here. My mom was on prescription drugs because of depression. My dad was a drinker. And although both my parents, I know they loved all of us, the three boys, dearly. But when I was the first in our family to become a Christian at the age of 19, and then it kind of spread. And so it became the family against Dad. And because he was a guy that generally ruled by putting the foot down. And any of you seen that movie, the new one out, the Disney Pixar movie? Inside Out. I'm pulling that. I recommend it. It was really good. But there's a scene in there where the dad puts his foot down, and it was really funny. And all of us know as dads what it's like to put our foot down. Well, my dad he had a big foot, he put it down. And so everyone kind of felt like, high control and so forth. Well, I can remember as a 19-year-old kid going to my dad and just saying, well, you're not in control anymore. What an arrogant, just thinking, we now have Jesus, and that's just the thing of it, guys, is we come to Christ, but yet we got all this other stuff. And my mom, I didn't know it then, but she used victim power and eventually gained a victim identity. Victim power, as we use victim power and it works, and we use powerlessness in order to gain power, we actually gain, and at some point we actually have an identity as a victim. And that's really what occurred with my mother. She would come to me and just say, Mike, you're so smart. Tell me about what the scriptures say about this and this and this. And then she would listen and do this. And, oh, yes. And then on the other side, my dad would be telling, I respected my dad. I loved my dad. I wanted it to be good. And I'd listen to my dad and his side of things. And so I became this in-between person in the marriage, being manipulated to the nth degree and not even know it. I thought I was this it'd be so ridiculous, 20-year-old young guy in this position, which is super unfair for any young person. But it happened. And it took way into my 30s, after my parents were divorced, to realize that it was all manipulation. They could give a squat what I say. It was all about gaining power. And you know, my mom had no intention to do whatever. My mom, like the rest of us, my mom is not a bad person. She was a wonderful person. But she gained this whole identity. And so then the years passed. We raised our family, Sandra and I, and then my mom was remarried, and Bud passed away. Just a wonderful Christian man, wonderful husband to my mom. And but when he passed away, I was her primary caregiver for the last 3 years of her life. And I'd go over there and see her, and you guys are aware of that. But guys, countless times, just countless times when we would meet somebody in a restaurant or somewhere, she would go into this script and say, well, hi, and I just lost my husband and I'm grieving. You know, I would hear it over and over and over again. And I just, this is so pitiful. Yes, we all know. And then, you know, with working with my mom, again, she was a very fragile, very loving person, but truly a victim identity, because she, it was fine as long as we'd agree with her, but with my brother and I would try to direct things a little bit differently that we thought was best for her. You don't understand. Have any of you ever received that? Bob? Yeah. You.
I've got my own version of that. So.
Well, you'll be able to tell it just a little
Not nearly
bit.
as elegant as yours.
Most of this is true, at least for my.
And my wife is going through the very same thing right now, where her husband died 6 years ago, and she's still playing the tapes. So, and frustrating my wife to no end. You know, come on, get out of the house, come visit, you know, your grandchildren, right? And you can't seem to bug her. She's literally, she's totally exercising the practice you've got up on the wall.
Uh-huh.
There.
And who is this again?
My wife's mother.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
Liv's mom.
uh-huh.
But I watch my mom and dad do just exactly what you described as well. So I have a much older, personal version of that played out for me. And then it's replaying again in my wife's family. So it's either I won a lottery or it's more common.
Oh, I think it's so common.
It's more common than you thought.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, Bob.
You know, on a bigger scale, I mean, not to minimize the stories being told here, but I think that's a lot of what's going on in the racist argument in the nation today.
That's true.
Right here.
Yeah. You are white. I am black.
I'm a victim.
I am a victim, and no matter what you do, you are white. That is it. Or, guys closer to home, you are gay. I am straight. And no matter what you do, you are gay. That's going to rub some of you the wrong way. But, guys, it's the same.
I think along in that argument, the gays have used this and they're depicting themselves as the victim.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
the victim of our society.
Yeah.
And our society has bought the lie, hook, line, and sinker.
Well, yes, but I purposely changed that around, Carl, because
Okay.
to shock us into maybe thinking a little bit differently.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no doubt
Yeah.
that what you're saying is true, but what I'm trying to say is this is a human issue, a human problem that Jesus died for, and now to turn the table a little bit here, when we think of Jesus on the cross. Visualize Jesus on the cross for a moment. At that moment in history and time, there was a time when he was there, and he represented, and actually not represented, became everything that all humanity fears and doubts and hates. If you look at Jesus on the cross, he is everything that we fear. A dying, naked, weak, vulnerable person. A failure. We fear that. And the fact that we fear it is just a proof that this is true within us as human beings. But yet, what is so amazing? And guys, I'm taking this to a different level because we generally think of Jesus dying on the cross as an amazing sacrifice for sin so I can go free. I am not minimizing that. Absolutely the truth. But he is also the model. And that his dying there made himself, God incarnate, made himself vulnerable, weak, a failure in all respects. But yet he is the crucified, but he did not become the crucifier. He took it, and therein is the lesson to learn.
Praise God.
Is that through it ended there.
Yes. Help me.
He had every right. He is the epitome of injustice. But he had every right to then take vengeance and reproach and to get back and even. But he took it upon himself. And the scriptures say, for the joy that was set before him, the joy of being reunited and one with his Father. There is much more here. Each of us, guys, have been, golly, I want to do so much more here, but I was gabbing.
Because
Vic-
just what Laban said in verse 29.
Which is what?
I have the power to hurt you guys that are hanging on this cross.
Yeah.
Well, you know what, we are all sinned against.
Yeah.
And will be sinned against. And in our own sinfulness, we tend to want to bring harm to others
Right.
in response.
Yeah. That's exactly it.
Instead of taking responsibility for our own actions.
That,
We really flee responsibility.
This
and
victim
because we're afraid. We're afraid of everything Jesus became. And he's calling us to the same and to trust me. Yes.
This victim trap, I think we've all seen, people play out, oh, poor me, and
Yeah.
this is why the thing, what a powerful trap that Satan has thrown out there, and
Yeah.
a lot of people have fallen into it.
Yeah.
I imagine, I've experienced that at some points in my life. Found myself, oh, poor me.
Yeah, I have no doubt, and what you're saying is true of you is true of me. I've used victim power. I don't have a victim identity. We know people who have victim identity, and the only way out of a victim identity is for everyone around them to realize it and start causing them through our reaction and interchange is to start taking responsibility, like Steve's saying right here. Well, my last slide here on this is that it becomes an engine. There's my engine, guys. There's my V8 engine here, that the way this model works, victim power builds, if it's allowed to continue, victim identity. And victim identity will only transmit victim power. And it's a vicious engine that builds in families over time. Laban is demonstrating that, and that really sets the stage for Jacob's response that we'll look at next time. So, thank you.
Speaking of next time,
Yeah.
are we meeting next week?